My name is Sarah, and I taught for 10 years before joining 240, and now I've helped thousands of teachers pass the Praxis exams. Today, I'm here to help you. This video is going to explain a little bit about the Elementary Education Content Knowledge for Teaching exam, commonly called the CKT for short. And while many people refer to the CKT as a whole, it's actually made up of 4 smaller subtests: Reading and Language Arts, Math, Science, and Social Studies. All right, this video is going to cover 3 things: the framework of the test and summary of its standards, the subject breakdown of the exam, and a few practice questions to illustrate these concepts. First things first, at 240, we know certification exams. And trust me when I tell you that the CKT exams are weird. They use a different framework than most exams for teacher certification. You're still dealing with all select response questions, but instead of focusing primarily on your math or social studies content with a separate area dedicated to pedagogy, these tests blend content and pedagogical knowledge in nearly every question. To help you understand what you'll need to know for each area, both content and pedagogy, the CKT exams use 2 different sets of standards. So let's dive in. You've got your content standards, which are pretty similar to any other Praxis content exam standards. Then you've got the tasks of teaching, or TOTs, which are pedagogy-focused standards. These outline the skills a teacher needs to be successful in the classroom. What makes the CKT test a bit unusual is that each question falls under one content standard and one task of teaching, meaning that each question requires you to use both pedagogical skills and content or subject area knowledge to determine the right answer. For example, a question may show you a student work sample and ask you to identify the most appropriate concept to reteach. Or it might ask you what instructional approach you would use to reteach a concept. Either way, you need to identify both the content-related student error and the best pedagogical practice to address it. Whew. So let's dig a bit deeper into the TOTs. Like the content standards, the TOTs are different for each subject. But pedagogy concepts and skills like assessment, remediation, and unit design will appear across all subjects, which makes studying for this exam a bit easier. Similar to the content standards, the amount of TOTs for each subject area will vary, but we're going to go through each subject one at a time until we hit them all. Let's start with Reading and Language Arts. You'll have 90 minutes to answer 63 selected response questions. The content standards are broken up into 3 categories: foundational literacy skills, language, and constructing meaning. And each category has a list of topics that you'll need to know. Here's what that list looks like for ELA. You can either spend time digging in to figure out exactly what is in each of these topics, or you can just use our study guide, where we've done all the digging for you. Now, don't forget, that's only the content standards list. We still have the TOTs to discuss. ELA has 10 TOTs in total, but they fall into 2 main categories: planning and facilitating instruction and analyzing student learning. I promised we'd talk some sample questions, right? Let it never be said that Sarah does not keep her promises. We won't wait any longer. We're headed to a sample question right now. This question falls under the ELA content standard about producing clear and coherent writing by adapting the organization and style of written information to the audience, task, and purpose. It also includes task of teaching number 1 for ELA, which is evaluating texts, examples, and graphic representations for their support of particular ELA instructional goals. Okay, here we go. A 3rd grade student is struggling to organize their narrative writing into logical sequences. Their essays often jump from one topic to another, with details placed in unrelated paragraphs. Which of the following would be the most beneficial step for the teacher to take in this scenario? Okay, so this question first requires you to understand what might be appropriate for a third grade student with regard to writing narrative essays, which involves considering both the developmental and academic levels alongside the ELA content itself. Then you need to identify the instructional objective provided in the question. And finally, you need to select the most appropriate activity based on the student's grade level and stated instructional objective. Now, here are the answer choices. The instructional objective is provided in the first sentence of the question, to organize their narrative writing into logical sequences. So we know that the best answer choice will be one that helps the student organize their thoughts into a clear and logical sequence. And don't forget, it still has to be developmentally appropriate for a third grade student. Choices B and D do not target the area of need. A KWL chart is more appropriate for note-taking or activating prior knowledge, not as a pre-writing tool. And while an editing checklist can be a beneficial tool, it does not target the specific area of need in the question. Choice C could be a valuable activity for the student to do as part of the writing process, but still it is not developmentally appropriate on its own. Think about it. A third grade student should be able to convey their thoughts in a written format. Choice A allows for connection to the real world, is engaging, and is developmentally appropriate. Therefore, A is the correct answer. Now, a key tip here is that you'll often see more than one okay answer, but you're tasked with finding the best answer. So don't stop reading once you found a choice that could work. Next up is math. The math subtest gives you 85 minutes to complete 52 questions. You may notice that's a little longer per question than ELA, since they're giving you time to actually do the math problems that are put in front of you. The math content standards are broken down into 4 categories: counting and operations with whole numbers, place value and decimals, fractions, operation with fractions and ratios, and equations, expressions, measurement, and geometry. And we match those content standards with 16 math tasks of teaching. Just like ELA, we can sort these 16 tasks into a few categories: explanations, conjectures, and definitions, problems, examples, and structures, representations and manipulatives, and student strategies and errors. Ready to try and put these together into a question? This question is going to use the content standard about operations with fractions and task of teaching 15, where you're asked to interpret a student's mathematical error and find an example that makes the same error. A student made an error when adding fractions. Her work is shown here. Which of the following student samples shows work similar to the sample? The first step here is to solve the problem yourself, to figure out where the student made an error. Then you'll need to try and work through each of the answer choices until you find a similar error. The student found a common denominator for the fractions, which was correct. However, they made the mistake of adding both the numerators and the common denominators together, when only the numerators should have been added. Looking at the answer choices, this is the correct answer. Just like the example, this answer shows a student finding a common denominator, then adding the denominators. You still with me? Phew, we're doing great. Science is up next. The science subtest is made up of 47 questions, and you'll have an hour to complete it. It's made up of 4 categories: Earth and space science, life science, physical science, and engineering, technology, and the application of science. Now, prepare yourself, because the science exam has 27 TOTs. That's so many we can't even fit them all on the screen. So let's just focus on the 7 TOT categories instead. You've got scientific instructional goals, scientific investigations and demonstrations, scientific resources, student ideas, scientific language, scientific explanations, and scientific models and representations. And like I said, I know this is a lot, so if you are feeling a little overwhelmed, check out our study guide. We've got content that addresses each standard, both content and task of teaching for each subtest. But for now, let's look at a question. For this one, you're going to reference Content Standard D2A about specific traits increasing an organism's chance of survival, and TOT4 under the Instructional Goals group. Now for the question. Miss Riley is coming to the end of a unit on specialized structures, and she wants to reinforce that plants and animals have specialized characteristics that help them perform specific tasks. She introduces an inquiry activity where she gives each student a plastic cup filled with sunflower seeds, a paperclip, a pair of tweezers, a spoon, and a toothpick. She asks the students to spread the sunflower seeds out on the tables and use each object to attempt to pick up as many seeds as possible in 30 seconds. In a post-activity discussion, Ms. Riley tells her students that the different objects were supposed to represent various beak shapes of birds. Which question should she ask next to best activate students' thinking about the learning goal? Choice D will best help students connect the shape of the specialized structures to their ideal function, as they see that certain beak shapes are best for picking up small, narrow seeds. We're so close. Time for social studies. Let's wrap this up. This last but certainly not least subtest will give you 60 questions in 50 minutes. Social studies is made up of 4 content categories: history, government and citizenship, human and physical geography, and economics. And if you're still recovering from TOT shock in science, never fear. Social studies only has 5 total TOTs, and they're all pretty standard best practices in teaching. Ready for our final question? This question falls under an economics content standard that requires you to understand how human needs are met, and task of teaching number 4. Task of teaching number 4 is about designing learning experiences to promote student understanding of social studies content and processes. Let's check it out. A 6th grade teacher is planning a unit on personal finance and budgeting. He wants students to be engaged and interested so they can understand how to apply the content to their future and present lives. Which of the following activities would be most appropriate given this objective? Let's break down those skills. First, you need to understand what might be appropriate for a 6th grade unit on personal finance and budgeting. Again, that requires you to think about both the developmental and academic level, alongside the social studies content itself. Then you need to identify the instructional objective provided in the question. And finally, you will select the most appropriate activity based on the student's grade level and stated instructional objective. Let's apply those skills and choose the best answer. The stated instructional objective is provided in the second sentence of the question. They understand how to apply the content to their future and present lives. So we know that the best activity will help students connect their content to their real lives. So we're looking for a developmentally and academically appropriate activity for 6th grade related to personal finance and budgeting that helps students connect the content to their lives. Choices B and C do not target aspects of budgeting and personal finance that would be relevant to 6th grade students. While a guest speaker could help engage students, most 6th grade students do not have or understand checking accounts. Choice D would also not be appropriate due to privacy concerns. Choice A allows for connection to the real world, is engaging, and is developmentally and academically appropriate. A is the correct answer. We made it! We zoomed through 4 subtests. And while the CKT exams aren't any less weird, hopefully you feel a bit more prepared to tackle them. But don't forget, there is so much more to learn than what we had time to go over today. If you really want to feel like you're ready for the CKT exams, check out our study guide. Congratulations on finishing the video. If you found it helpful, give it a like. The CKT exam is a bit unique, but we have your back on this one. The study guide is made specifically to prepare you for these types of questions. It has hours of videos so that you can watch or listen while doing chores. It's test aligned so you know precisely what you need to study. And it has hundreds of practice questions and a practice test that aligns with the style and content of CKT questions, so you can be sure you're ready. And it has a money-back guarantee. It really does have everything you'll need to absolutely crush this test. We believe in you, so click the link right below to get started.